I woke up at 3 a.m. with my heart pounding. Something felt wrong. Not the kind of wrong that comes from a bad dream, but the kind that settles in your bones when your body knows something your mind hasn't figured out yet. I lay there in the darkness of my bedroom, listening to the silence of my small apartment, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had already happened. At my age, 72 years old, you learn to trust these feelings. You learn that intuition isn't some mystical thing, it's just your brain connecting dots faster than your conscious mind can follow. And my brain was screaming at me that something was very, very wrong. I got out of bed slowly, my joints protesting the way they always do in the middle of the night, and walked to my closet. My hand reached for the light switch, and when the bulb flickered on, I saw it. My dress. The dress I had carefully chosen for my grandson Daniel's wedding. The dress I had saved for months to buy. The beautiful lavender silk dress with the delicate embroidery at the collar. It was hanging exactly where I had left it the night before, still in its protective garment bag. But something was wrong with the bag. It looked deflated somehow, emptier than it should have been. My hands were shaking as I unzipped it. The dress fell out in pieces. Long, deliberate cuts. The fabric had been sliced methodically, violently from top to bottom. The embroidery was destroyed. The silk hung in ribbons. Someone had taken scissors or a knife and systematically destroyed the most expensive piece of clothing I had bought in 5 years. I stood there holding the ruined fabric, and I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt something inside me go very, very cold. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. What time is it where you are right now? If this story resonates with you, if you've ever been betrayed by the people you trusted most, leave a like. Subscribe to see how this ends. Because what happened next changed everything. Let me take you back 6 months, to when this all started. To when I still believed that family meant something. My name is Margaret Holloway. I'm 72 years old, and I live alone in a modest 1-bedroom apartment in a quiet part of town. I've lived here for 8 years, ever since my husband Robert passed away. Before that, we had a house, a real home with a garden, and 3 bedrooms and a kitchen where I could bake bread every Sunday. But after Robert died and the medical bills took everything we had saved, I downsized. I sold the house, I moved into this apartment, and I learned to be content with less. Content, but not bitter. That's important. I never let myself become one of those angry old women who poison every conversation with resentment. I had my health, mostly. I had my independence. I had my dignity. And I had my family. Or so I thought. Daniel is my oldest grandson. He's 28 years old, a software engineer, smart and successful in ways that his father, my son Marcus, never quite managed to be. I watched Daniel grow up. I was there when he took his first steps. I was there for every birthday party, every school play, every graduation. When his parents divorced when he was 12, I was the one who held him while he cried. When he got into college, I was the one who helped him move into his dorm room, even though my back was screaming at me the whole time. We were close. Or I thought we were. 6 months ago, Daniel called me with news. He was engaged. Her name was Vanessa. They had been dating for 2 years, and he was going to marry her. He sounded so happy on the phone, so excited, and I felt that warm flood of grandmotherly joy that comes from seeing your grandchildren find happiness. I asked him when I could meet her. There was a pause on the line, a hesitation that I noticed, but didn't understand yet. He told me soon. He told me they were busy with wedding planning. He told me Vanessa was overwhelmed with work. He told me a lot of things that all basically meant not yet. But I didn't push. I'm not the kind of grandmother who demands constant attention. I understand that young people have their own lives, their own priorities. So I waited. I sent a card congratulating them both. I sent a check, a generous one considering my fixed income, as an engagement gift. I got a text message thanking me. Not a call. A text. That should have been my first warning sign. The months passed. I would call Daniel every week or two, the way I always had, and he would answer maybe half the time. When he did answer, our conversations got shorter. He was always busy, always had somewhere to be, always had something more important than talking to his grandmother. I told myself it was normal. He was getting married, he was planning a wedding. Of course he was busy. Then, 3 months ago, I finally met Vanessa. Daniel brought her to my apartment for Sunday afternoon tea. I had spent all morning cleaning, baking cookies, arranging everything perfectly. I wanted her to feel welcome. I wanted her to know that I wasn't one of those difficult mother-in-laws or grandmother-in-laws who would make her life miserable. I wanted us to start off on the right foot. Vanessa walked into my apartment, and I saw immediately that she had already made up her mind about me. She was beautiful. I'll give her that. 26 years old, tall and slim with perfect hair and perfect makeup and perfect clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She smiled when Daniel introduced us, but it was the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. The kind of smile you give to someone you're tolerating rather than someone you're genuinely pleased to meet. We sat down for tea. I poured from my good china, the set that had been my mother's, and I offered cookies that were still warm from the oven. I asked Vanessa about herself, about her work, about how she and Daniel met. I tried to be warm. I tried to be interested. I tried to be the kind of welcoming family member that would make her feel included. She answered my questions with the minimum number of words possible. She barely touched her tea. She didn't eat a single cookie. And about 20 minutes into the visit, she looked at her phone and announced that they needed to leave. Daniel looked uncomfortable. He apologized, said they had another commitment. He hugged me goodbye quickly, and then they were gone. I stood in my apartment, looking at the untouched cookies, the barely sipped tea, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt small. I felt dismissed. I felt like I had somehow failed a test I didn't know I was taking. But I told myself I was being oversensitive. Maybe Vanessa was just shy. Maybe she was nervous about meeting Daniel's family. Maybe I had misread the situation. I called Daniel a few days later to ask how the wedding planning was going. He was distracted, short with me. When I asked if I could help with anything, if there was any way I could contribute, he told me they had it all under control. When I asked about the wedding date, he said they were still finalizing details. Another month passed. I sent Daniel a text asking if he and Vanessa wanted to come over for dinner. No response. I sent another text a week later. No response. I finally called, and he picked up sounding annoyed. He told me he was busy. He told me Vanessa was stressed about the wedding. He told me they would visit when things calmed down. I asked him directly, was something wrong? Had I done something to upset Vanessa? He said no. Everything was fine. They were just busy. But his voice had that edge to it, that tone that told me he was lying. I'm 72 years old. I've raised 2 children. I've been married for 46 years before my husband died. I know when someone is lying to me. Still, I didn't push. I didn't want to be that grandmother, the demanding one, the difficult one, the one who causes problems. Then, 2 months ago, the wedding invitation arrived in my mailbox. I opened it with trembling hands, so excited to finally have the details, to finally know when and where my grandson would be getting married. The invitation was beautiful, cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing, clearly expensive. I read through all the details. The ceremony would be at a beautiful venue outside the city. The reception would follow immediately after, black tie optional, and at the bottom, in small, elegant script, there was a note. Limited seating available. Please RSVP by the specified date. I called Daniel immediately. I told him I received the invitation and that of course I would be there. I asked if he needed any help with preparations. I offered to contribute financially if they needed it, even though I barely had anything to spare. He thanked me. He said he would let me know. He sounded distracted again. I marked the date on my calendar in red ink. October 14th, a Saturday. I started planning immediately. I would need to buy a dress, something appropriate for a formal wedding. I would need to arrange transportation since I don't drive anymore. I would need to budget carefully to make sure I could afford a nice gift. That's when I started saving for the lavender dress. I found it at a department store during a sale. It was still expensive, more than I usually spent on clothes, but it was perfect. Elegant, but not showy. Age-appropriate, but not dowdy. The kind of dress that would make me look like a grandmother who was proud to be there, proud of her grandson, proud to be part of this important day. I bought it 6 weeks before the wedding. I hung it in my closet in a garment bag. Every time I looked at it, I felt a warm glow of anticipation. 3 weeks before the wedding, I called Daniel to ask about accommodations. The venue was 2 hours away, and I wanted to know if there was a hotel nearby where I should book a room. I was worried about the cost, but I would figure it out. This was my grandson's wedding. Daniel's voice was strange when he answered. Uncomfortable. He said he would check and get back to me. He didn't get back to me. I called again a week later. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail. No response. I texted him, "Hi, sweetie, just following up about hotel information for the wedding. Need to book soon. Love you." He responded 6 hours later. "We'll let you know soon." Something in my gut twisted. That feeling I had learned to trust. That feeling that told me something was very wrong. 2 weeks before the wedding, I called Marcus, Daniel's father, my son. I asked him if he knew what was going on. I asked him if Daniel had said anything about me, about whether I had somehow offended him or Vanessa. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said in a careful voice that he thought Daniel and Vanessa were just stressed about the wedding. He said not to worry about it. He said everything would be fine. But he didn't sound convinced, and he didn't offer any real information. I felt it then, that shift. That moment when you realize that something has changed fundamentally in your relationships, and you weren't consulted, you weren't even informed, you were just left behind. 1 week before the wedding, I still didn't have hotel information. I made the decision to book a room myself at a hotel I found online near the venue. It was expensive. It took a significant chunk of my monthly budget. But this was my grandson's wedding. This was important. I called Daniel one more time to let him know I had booked accommodations and to ask if there was anything I could bring, anything I could help with. He answered, and before I could finish my sentence, he cut me off. He said they had everything under control. He said I didn't need to worry about anything. He said he would see me at the wedding. Then he hung up. I sat there holding my phone, and for the first time, I felt real fear. Not worry, not concern, fear. Something was very wrong. The day before the wedding, Friday afternoon, I finished packing my small overnight bag. I laid out the lavender dress on my bed to give it a final inspection, to make sure there were no loose threads or stains. It was perfect. I hung it back in the garment bag carefully, zipped it up, and placed it in my closet. Tomorrow morning, I would get up early, get dressed, call a car service, and go to my grandson's wedding. I went to bed that night feeling anxious but hopeful. Maybe I had been overthinking everything. Maybe Daniel had just been busy. Maybe Vanessa would warm up to me once the wedding stress was over. Maybe everything would be fine. I woke up at 3 a.m. to check on the dress, and I found it destroyed. Now, standing in my closet at 3:15 in the morning, holding ribbons of lavender silk that used to be a dress, I knew with absolute certainty what had happened. Someone had broken into my apartment while I was sleeping. Someone had gone into my closet. Someone had taken scissors or a knife to my dress. Someone had destroyed the one thing I needed for tomorrow. And I knew exactly who it was. I stood there for a long moment, just breathing, forcing myself to think clearly. My hands were still shaking, but my mind was starting to work again, starting to process what this meant. This wasn't random. This wasn't some bizarre coincidence. This was deliberate. This was targeted. This was meant to send a message. And the message was clear. You're not wanted. I looked at the clock. 3:20 in the morning. In a few hours, I was supposed to get up and get ready for the wedding. But now I had no dress. Now I had evidence that someone had broken into my home. Now I had a choice to make. I could call the police. I could report the break-in. I could make this into a whole thing, involve authorities, delay the wedding, cause drama, or I could stay quiet. I could not go to the wedding. I could let them win. I could disappear from Daniel's life the way they clearly wanted me to, or I could do something else entirely. I carefully gathered up all the pieces of the destroyed dress. I laid them out on my bed, taking photographs of each piece with my phone, making sure the cuts were clearly visible. Then I placed all the pieces back into the garment bag and hung it in my closet exactly where it had been. I checked my front door. No signs of forced entry. Which meant whoever did this had a key. Which meant it was someone with access to my apartment. Which meant it was someone in my family. I sat down at my small kitchen table with a cup of tea that I didn't drink and thought through everything that had happened over the past 6 months. All the missed calls, all the short conversations, all the excuses, all the ways I had been slowly, methodically pushed out of Daniel's life. And I thought about Vanessa. About the way she had looked at my apartment during that one visit. About the way she had looked at me. Like I was something dirty, something embarrassing, something to be hidden away. I thought about how Daniel had changed after he met her. How he had stopped calling as often. How he had stopped visiting. How he had become someone I barely recognized. And I realized that this had been planned. This hadn't been about the dress at all. The dress was just the final move in a game I hadn't even known I was playing. They had been trying to get rid of me. They had been trying to make me disappear from Daniel's life. And destroying my dress the night before the wedding wasn't about preventing me from having something nice to wear. It was about humiliating me. It was about making sure I couldn't attend. It was about sending a message that I wasn't welcome. That I never had been welcome. That I never would be welcome. At 3:45 in the morning, I made my decision. I wasn't going to call the police. I wasn't going to cause a scene. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me hurt and angry and desperate. I was going to that wedding, and I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly what kind of people Daniel and Vanessa really were. I went back to my closet and looked through my other clothes. I didn't have anything remotely appropriate for a black tie optional wedding. Everything I owned was casual. Everyday clothes, jeans, sweaters, simple blouses. I had spent all my dress-up clothing budget on the lavender dress that was now in pieces. But then I remembered something. I went to the back of my closet, to the very back where I kept things I almost never wore. And I found it. My mother's old black dress. The one she had worn to funerals and formal occasions. The one I had kept after she died 30 years ago, unable to part with it even though I never wore it. I pulled it out. It was old-fashioned, certainly. Long sleeves, high neckline, simple black fabric with no embellishments. It smelled faintly of mothballs and old perfume. But it was clean. It was intact. It would fit. It wasn't what I had wanted to wear to my grandson's wedding. It wasn't happy or celebratory, but it would do. I laid it out on my bed next to the destroyed lavender dress, and I took a photograph of both of them together. The contrast was stark, the beautiful dress in ribbons, the somber black dress still whole. Then I went back to bed. I didn't sleep. I just lay there, thinking, planning, preparing myself for what was coming. At 6 in the morning, I got up. I showered. I fixed my hair. I put on light makeup. I dressed carefully in my mother's old black dress. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like I was going to a funeral. Perfect. I called the car service at 7:30. The driver arrived at 8. I had him take me to the venue, which was a 2-hour drive through beautiful countryside that I barely noticed. I sat in the back seat, clutching my small purse, rehearsing in my head what I would say, how I would handle this. We arrived at the venue at 10 in the morning. The ceremony wasn't until 2 in the afternoon, but I had planned to arrive early deliberately. I wanted to see the setup. I wanted to observe. I wanted to understand exactly what I was walking into. The venue was beautiful. An old estate with manicured gardens and a white tent set up for the reception. There were already people there, vendors and coordinators and members of the wedding party. I saw Daniel's father, Marcus, directing someone carrying flowers. I saw Daniel's mother, my ex-daughter-in-law Patricia, fussing over table arrangements. I walked slowly toward the main building where I assumed the ceremony would take place. Nobody noticed me at first. I was just another older woman in a black dress, easy to overlook. Then Patricia saw me. Her face went white. She rushed over, and I could see the panic in her eyes. "Margaret," she said, "what are you doing here?" I looked at her calmly. I said, "I'm here for Daniel's wedding. Why wouldn't I be here?" She glanced around nervously like she was looking for backup. She said, "Did Daniel tell you to come?" I smiled. I said, "I received an invitation. I RSVP'd. I'm a guest." That's when Marcus came over. He looked uncomfortable, guilty almost. He said, "Mom, maybe we should talk." I said, "I'd be happy to talk. Should we do it here or would you prefer somewhere more private?" He flinched at the implication. Patricia grabbed his arm and whispered something urgent in his ear. They both looked at me like I was a bomb about to explode. Then Vanessa appeared. She was already in her wedding preparation mode, wearing an elegant robe with her name embroidered on it, her hair in curlers. But when she saw me, her expression went from surprised to furious in about half a second. She walked straight up to me, and I have to give her credit. She didn't even try to hide her contempt. She said, "You weren't supposed to come." I said, very calmly, "Why not?" She said, "Because you weren't invited." I said, "I have an invitation." She said, "That was a mistake." The word hung in the air. A mistake. My invitation to my own grandson's wedding was a mistake. I could have argued. I could have gotten angry. I could have made a scene right there, but I didn't. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I opened my photo gallery to the pictures I had taken that morning, the destroyed dress, the pieces of lavender silk, the deliberate cuts. I held the phone up so Vanessa could see it. I said, "Did you do this yourself, or did you send someone?" Her face didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Recognition, guilt. And then, almost immediately, defiance. She said, "I don't know what you're talking about." I said, "Someone broke into my apartment last night and destroyed the dress I bought for this wedding. The only way they could have gotten in without forcing the door is if they had a key. Daniel has a key to my apartment. He's had one since he was 16 in case of emergencies." Vanessa didn't respond, but I could see her mind working. She was trying to figure out how much I knew, how much I could prove. I said, "I'm not here to cause problems. I'm here to attend my grandson's wedding." "But I think we both know that's not going to happen now, is it?" she said coldly. "No, it's not. You need to leave." I said, "Why? What did I do to you? What did I do to Daniel that made you both decide I wasn't worth including in your life?" For a moment, just a moment, I thought she might actually tell me the truth. I thought she might explain why she had gone to such lengths to exclude me, to hurt me, to push me out of Daniel's life. But instead, she said something that told me everything I needed to know about who she really was. She said, "You're embarrassing. You live in that tiny apartment. You dress like you shop at thrift stores. You're everything I don't want associated with our wedding or our life. Daniel deserves better than having to explain his poor grandmother to our friends." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not because they hurt my feelings, though they did, but because they revealed exactly what kind of person I was dealing with. Someone for whom appearances mattered more than relationships. Someone for whom status mattered more than family. Someone who had convinced my grandson that I was something to be ashamed of. I looked at Vanessa for a long moment. Then I said, "I see." I put my phone back in my purse. I said, "I'll leave. But first, I need to speak to Daniel." Vanessa said, "Absolutely not," I said. "Then I'll stand right here until he comes to me. Your choice." We stared at each other. She was calculating, trying to figure out which would cause less of a scene. Finally, she turned and stalked away, presumably to find Daniel. Marcus and Patricia stood a few feet away, looking miserable. I ignored them. Whatever part they had played in this, whatever they had known or not known, they were just audience members now. 5 minutes later, Daniel appeared. He was already dressed for the wedding, wearing his tuxedo. He looked handsome and grown up, and nothing like the little boy I used to read bedtime stories to. He walked toward me slowly, like he was approaching something dangerous. When he reached me, he didn't say hi. He didn't hug me. He just said, "Grandma, you need to leave." I said, "Did you know about my dress?" He looked confused for a second. Then understanding dawned on his face. He looked away, and I had my answer. I said, "You did it yourself, didn't you? You still have the key to my apartment. You went there last night while I was sleeping, and you destroyed my dress so I wouldn't be able to come today." He said quietly, "Vanessa thought it would be easier this way." I said, "Easier than what? Easier than telling me to my face that I wasn't welcome? Easier than being honest?" He said, "You don't understand. Vanessa's family is very important, very connected. This wedding is about making the right impression. It's about networking. It's about our future." I said, "And I would ruin that future?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. I stood there looking at my grandson, this person I had loved and supported and believed in, and I realized that he was gone. The Daniel I knew, the sweet boy who used to hold my hand and tell me stories and ask me to make him cookies, that person didn't exist anymore. Or maybe he had never existed at all. Maybe I had just been too blind to see who he really was. I said, quietly, "I raised you better than this." He flinched. I said, "Your grandfather, my Robert, he would be so ashamed of you right now. He would be ashamed that you let someone convince you to treat your own family like we're disposable. He would be ashamed that you broke into my home and destroyed my property rather than having the courage to tell me the truth." Daniel's jaw tightened. He said, "I did what I had to do." I said, "No. You did what was easy, and you're going to regret it for the rest of your life." Then I turned and started walking toward the parking lot where my car service was waiting. Daniel called after me, "Grandma, wait." I stopped and turned back. He said, "I'm sorry it had to be this way." I said, "No, you're not. But you will be." Then I got in the car and left. The driver asked if everything was okay. I said it was fine. We drove back to the city in silence. When I got home to my apartment, I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I didn't give in to the hurt that was trying to swallow me whole. Instead, I sat down at my kitchen table and I started making plans. Because here's what Daniel and Vanessa didn't understand. I might be old, but I'm not powerless. I might be poor, but I'm not stupid. And I might have been hurt, but I wasn't defeated. They had made a mistake. They had underestimated me, and they had left evidence. Over the next week, I did several things. First, I filed a police report about the break-in and property damage. I provided the photographs of the destroyed dress. I explained that someone had used a key to enter my apartment without permission. I gave them Daniel's name. The police took the report. They said they would investigate. Second, I went to a lawyer. I used money I had been saving for emergencies, and I paid for a consultation. I explained everything that had happened, the harassment, the exclusion, the break-in, the destroyed property. The lawyer listened carefully. Then she told me I had several options. I could pursue criminal charges for the break-in and property destruction. I could file a civil suit for damages, both material and emotional. I could get a restraining order. But she also told me something else. She told me that legal action might not give me what I really wanted, which was justice. Legal action would take time and money and energy, and it would end with either a small settlement or Daniel having a criminal record. She asked me what I really wanted from this situation. I thought about it for a long time. Then I told her the truth. I wanted Daniel to understand what he had done. I wanted him to face consequences. And I wanted Vanessa to realize that treating people the way she treated me comes with a cost. The lawyer smiled. She said she understood. Then she helped me craft something much more effective than a lawsuit. We wrote a letter, a detailed, factual, documented letter explaining everything that had happened, the gradual exclusion. The destroyed invitation that I later learned was never actually mailed to me. Someone had just placed it in my mailbox to maintain appearances. The destroyed dress, the confrontation at the wedding venue, everything. We attached photographs, police report numbers, dates, times, details. Then we sent copies of that letter to 50 people. We sent it to every member of Daniel's family, on both his mother's and father's side. We sent it to Vanessa's parents. We sent it to Marcus and Patricia. We sent it to Daniel's employer's Human Resources Department, noting that one of their employees had committed a crime against his elderly grandmother. We sent it to the venue where the wedding had taken place. We sent it to several of the vendors I recognized from my brief time there. We sent it to people whose names I found on Daniel's social media accounts, people who had congratulated him on his engagement, people who had probably attended the wedding. The letter didn't ask for anything. It didn't demand apologies or money or anything else. It just stated the facts and let people draw their own conclusions. 3 days after we sent the letters, my phone started ringing. First it was Marcus, panicked, asking what I had done. I told him I had told the truth. He said I was ruining Daniel's life. I said Daniel had done that himself. Then it was Patricia, crying, begging me to make it stop. I asked her what she expected me to do. She said she didn't know, but that people were calling her, asking questions, saying terrible things about Daniel and Vanessa. I said that was unfortunate. Then it was relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, calling to tell me they had no idea what had been going on, that they were appalled, that they supported me completely. Then it was Vanessa's mother, furious, threatening to sue me for defamation. I told her that truth is an absolute defense to defamation, and that if she wanted to pursue legal action, my lawyer would be happy to provide her with copies of the police report and photographs. She hung up on me. The calls kept coming, some supportive, some angry, some confused. I answered when I felt like it and ignored the rest. 2 weeks after the wedding that I didn't attend, Daniel showed up at my apartment. I saw him through the peephole and considered not opening the door, but curiosity won. I wanted to see what he had to say. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. He looked terrible, tired, stressed, older than he had looked at the venue. He said, "Can we talk?" I said, "What do you want to talk about?" He said, "About the letters, about what you did. Grandma, you destroyed my reputation. You made me look like a monster. Vanessa's parents are threatening to cut us off financially. My boss called me in for a meeting about workplace conduct. Our friends are looking at us differently. You've ruined everything." I said, "I simply told people what happened. If that ruined your reputation, perhaps you should consider what that says about your actions." He said, "It wasn't supposed to be like this. We just wanted a perfect wedding. We just wanted everything to be right." I said, "And I was the thing that would make it not right?" He didn't answer. I said, "Daniel, you broke into my home. You destroyed my property. You lied to me for months. You excluded me from one of the most important days of your life because your fiancé thought I was embarrassing. And you expected me to, what, quietly disappear? Quietly accept that I wasn't good enough for you anymore?" He said, "You could have just not come. You could have stayed home. You didn't have to make this into a whole thing." I stared at him. I said, "I'm your grandmother. I raised you when your parents were too busy fighting to pay attention to you. I was there for every important moment of your life until Vanessa decided I wasn't worth including. And you think I should have just quietly accepted being thrown away? He said, "That's not what happened." I said, "That's exactly what happened. And the fact that you can't even admit it tells me everything I need to know about who you've become." We stood there in silence for a long moment. Finally, Daniel said, "What do you want from me? What do I have to do to fix this?" I said, "You can't fix it. It's done. You made your choice. You chose status and appearances and Vanessa's approval over your own family, and now you're dealing with the consequences of that choice." He said, "Are you ever going to forgive me?" I thought about it. I thought about all the years I had loved him, supported him, believed in him. I thought about the little boy who used to fall asleep on my couch while I read to him. I thought about the teenager who used to come over just to talk when he was struggling. I thought about all the versions of Daniel I had known and loved. And then I thought about the man standing in front of me now, the man who had broken into my home and destroyed my dress rather than face me honestly, the man who had let someone else tell him that his grandmother was embarrassing, the man who only cared about fixing things when his reputation was damaged. I said, "I don't know. Maybe someday. But not today, and probably not for a very long time." He looked like he might cry. He said, "I really am sorry." I said, "I believe that you're sorry you got caught. I believe that you're sorry there were consequences. But I don't believe you're sorry for what you did to me. Because if you were really sorry, you would have found a way to make this right before I had to force you to face it." Then I closed the door. I stood there for a few minutes, listening to him stand on the other side. Finally, I heard his footsteps walking away. The months since then have been strange, quiet in some ways, chaotic in others. Daniel and Vanessa are still married, as far as I know. They had their perfect wedding without me. Whether their marriage will survive the reputational damage they inflicted on themselves remains to be seen. Marcus calls me occasionally, trying to rebuild our relationship. I take his calls sometimes. We're working on it. It's hard, but we're trying. Patricia sent me a long letter, apologizing for not standing up for me, for going along with Daniel and Vanessa's plans because she didn't want to cause conflict. I haven't responded yet. I'm not sure I will. Other family members have been supportive. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years have reached out. My sister, Daniel's great aunt, was furious on my behalf and has cut off contact with Daniel entirely. As for me, I'm doing fine. Better than fine, actually. I used some of the money I had saved for wedding-related expenses and bought myself a new dress. Not lavender this time. Deep blue. Beautiful. I wear it when I go out to lunch with friends or to the occasional event at my community center. I changed my locks. Daniel no longer has a key to my apartment, and he never will again. I joined a support group for seniors dealing with family estrangement. It's helped more than I expected. Hearing other people's stories, realizing I'm not alone in this, it's given me perspective. It's also given me strength. About 4 months after the wedding, I received a text message from a number I didn't recognize. It was from one of Vanessa's bridesmaids, a woman named Jennifer, who had been at the venue that day. She said she had received my letter. She said she had seen how Vanessa treated me that morning, and she had felt sick about it ever since. She said she wanted me to know that what happened to me was wrong, and that she had ended her friendship with Vanessa over it. We met for coffee a week later. Jennifer is 32, bright and kind, and she told me things about Vanessa that confirmed everything I had suspected. About how Vanessa had spent months talking about Daniel's family in contemptuous terms. About how she had joked about trying to phase me out before the wedding. About how she had explicitly told her friends that she didn't want any poor or unsophisticated people at her wedding because it would ruin the aesthetic. Jennifer apologized for not speaking up sooner. She said she hadn't realized how serious it was until she read my letter, until she understood the full extent of what Vanessa had done. I told her I appreciated her coming forward, but that she didn't owe me an apology. Vanessa's behavior wasn't her responsibility, but Jennifer gave me something valuable. She gave me confirmation. She gave me validation that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't misread the situation, that everything I had perceived was real. 6 months after the wedding, Vanessa's parents did cut them off financially. I learned this through Marcus, who heard it from Daniel during one of their increasingly rare conversations. Apparently, Vanessa's father was so embarrassed by the scandal, so horrified that his daughter had treated someone's elderly grandmother that way, that he told them he wouldn't support people who behaved like that. Daniel and Vanessa had to move out of the expensive apartment her parents had been helping them pay for. They had to downsize significantly. The lifestyle they had been living, the lifestyle that was apparently so important that it justified excluding me, they couldn't afford it on their own. Karma, some people would say. I prefer to think of it as consequences. Around the same time, I received a package in the mail. Inside was a check for $800 and a note from Vanessa. The note was brief, formal, clearly written under duress. It said the check was to reimburse me for the destroyed dress and any related expenses. It did not include an apology. I deposited the check. I used the money to take a weekend trip to visit my sister. We went to a spa, got massages, had nice dinners, laughed together. It was wonderful. 8 months after the wedding, Daniel called me. Not texted, called. His voice sounded different, tired, sad. More genuine than it had been in a long time. He said he wanted to talk, really talk. He said he had been in therapy, working through things. He said he was starting to understand what he had done, how badly he had treated me, how completely he had failed as a grandson. He said he didn't expect me to forgive him. He just wanted me to know that he was sorry, truly sorry, and that he was working on becoming a better person. I listened. I didn't make it easy for him. I didn't rush to reassure him that everything was fine, because everything wasn't fine. But I also didn't hang up on him. I let him talk. I let him say what he needed to say. And when he was done, I told him that I appreciated him calling, that I was glad he was in therapy, and that maybe, someday, we could start to rebuild something. Maybe. He asked if he could call me again. I said yes, but that I wouldn't always answer. I told him that trust, once broken, the way he broke it, takes years to rebuild, if ever. He said he understood. We've spoken a few times since then, short conversations, careful, like we're two strangers learning how to talk to each other. He tells me about therapy. He tells me about work. He doesn't talk about Vanessa much, and I don't ask. I don't know if we'll ever get back what we had. Honestly, I don't know if I want to. The relationship we had before was based on me believing that he was someone he turned out not to be. Maybe what we're building now, this careful, honest thing, maybe it's actually better. Or maybe it's just the best we can do with what's left. 10 months after the wedding, I ran into Vanessa at a grocery store. We both froze when we saw each other. For a moment, I thought she would turn and walk away, but she didn't. She walked up to me and she said my name, just my name. Margaret. I said hello. She looked different, thinner, more tired, less polished. The perfect exterior had some cracks in it. She said, I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I need to say it. What I did to you was cruel. It was wrong. I convinced myself that it was about the wedding, about wanting everything to be perfect. But really, it was just about my own insecurity and snobbery. You didn't deserve any of it. I stood there holding my shopping basket, looking at this woman who had gone to such lengths to hurt me, and I felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not yet. But something like understanding. I said, Why did you do it? Really? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Because you reminded me of my own grandmother, the one my family was ashamed of because she never had money, never fit in with the image we wanted to project. We excluded her from everything. She died alone, and I didn't even go to her funeral because I was too embarrassed to be associated with her. And when I met you, when I saw that Daniel actually loved you and included you in his life, it made me feel things I didn't want to feel. So I tried to make you go away. She said, I know that doesn't make it better. I know it doesn't excuse what I did, but you asked for the truth, and that's the truth." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, "You know what the saddest part is? I would have liked you. If you had given me a chance, if you had let me be part of your life, I would have been happy for you and Daniel. I would have welcomed you. I would have been the grandmother you lost. But you didn't give me that chance. You decided who I was without ever knowing me." She nodded slowly. She said, "I know. And I'll regret that for the rest of my life." Then she said, "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Truly." I said, "Thank you for saying that. It means something." She looked like she wanted to say more, but instead she just nodded and walked away. I finished my shopping. I drove home. I put away my groceries. And I sat down with a cup of tea and thought about everything that had happened. Here's what I learned from all of this. I learned that getting older doesn't mean you have to accept being treated poorly. It doesn't mean you have to quietly disappear when people decide you're inconvenient or embarrassing or not worth including. I learned that dignity isn't about never being hurt. It's about how you respond when you are hurt. It's about refusing to let other people's cruelty define you. I learned that family is supposed to mean something. It's supposed to mean loyalty and love and showing up for each other. And when it doesn't mean those things, when people use the word family to justify treating you badly or excluding you or taking you for granted, you have the right to walk away. You have the right to protect yourself. I learned that speaking the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it causes conflict, is sometimes the most powerful thing you can do. That letter I sent, those facts I shared, they didn't destroy Daniel's reputation. His own actions did that. I just made sure people knew about them. I learned that consequences are not the same as revenge. I didn't try to hurt Daniel or Vanessa. I just made sure they had to face the reality of what they had done. That's not revenge. That's accountability. I learned that you can love someone deeply and still hold them responsible for their actions. That loving Daniel didn't mean I had to accept being treated badly. That being his grandmother didn't mean I had to quietly absorb his cruelty and betrayal. I learned that there are good people in the world who will stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. People like Jennifer, who ended a friendship over principle. People like Vanessa's father, who chose integrity over convenience. People like my sister and my cousins and the members of my support group who reminded me that I matter. And I learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. At 72 years old, after being widowed and downsized and pushed aside, I found the strength to fight back. Not with violence, not with cruelty, but with truth and documentation and the simple refusal to disappear quietly. That night, the night before the wedding that I didn't attend, when I found my dress cut to pieces, I had a choice. I could have let it break me. I could have accepted the message that I wasn't wanted, that I wasn't good enough, that I should just fade away. Instead, I chose to stand up. I chose to speak out. I chose to make sure that my grandson and his wife understood that actions have consequences, that you can't treat people the way they treated me without it costing you something. Some people might say I was too harsh, that I should have been more forgiving, that family should get infinite chances, that airing private matters was inappropriate. To those people, I would say this: I gave Daniel chance after chance. I forgave excuse after excuse. I accepted being pushed aside, being ignored, being treated as less important. I did all of that quietly, gracefully, without complaint. And what did it get me? It got me a destroyed dress and a clear message that I had no value in my own grandson's life. So no, I don't think I was too harsh. I think I was exactly as firm as I needed to be to make sure the lesson was learned. Do I wish things had been different? Of course. I wish Daniel had never met someone who would convince him to treat his family that way. I wish Vanessa had dealt with her own family trauma before projecting it onto me. I wish I could have attended my grandson's wedding, wearing my beautiful lavender dress and feeling proud and happy instead of hurt and excluded. But wishing doesn't change reality. And reality is that I had to stand up for myself because no one else was going to do it for me. It's been over a year now since that terrible night, since I woke up at 3 a.m. with a feeling that something was wrong and found my dress destroyed. My life has changed in ways I never expected. I'm more connected to extended family now than I have been in years. I have new friends from my support group. I have a sense of confidence and strength that I didn't have before. I know now that I can face difficult situations and come out on the other side intact. Daniel and I are slowly, carefully rebuilding something. It will never be what it was, but maybe it can be something real, something based on mutual respect rather than just familial obligation. Vanessa and I will probably never be close, but I think we understand each other now in a way we didn't before. She knows I'm not someone to be dismissed or discarded, and I know that her cruelty came from her own pain, which doesn't excuse it, but at least explains it. As for me, I'm doing well. I'm 73 now. I still live in my small apartment. I still manage on a fixed income. I still wear clothes from department store sales. And I'm not ashamed of any of it. Because here's what Daniel and Vanessa didn't understand, what people who think like them never understand. A person's worth has nothing to do with how much money they have, or where they live, or what they wear. A person's worth comes from how they treat others, from their integrity, from their courage, from their capacity to love and be loved. By those measures, I'm worth more than they ever gave me credit for. And I'm worth more than I sometimes gave myself credit for. That's perhaps the most important lesson of all, that I had to fight for myself before I could truly understand my own value. That being forced to stand up and speak out and refuse to disappear, that process taught me things about myself that I hadn't fully known before. I'm stronger than I thought. I'm braver than I believed. I'm more willing to stand alone if necessary than I ever imagined I could be. And at 73 years old, that's not a bad thing to learn about yourself. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that moment. Standing in my closet at 3 a.m, holding pieces of lavender silk, realizing that someone had hated me enough, or feared me enough, or wanted to erase me enough that they would break into my home and destroy something I valued. It was a violation. It was cruel. It was meant to break me. But here's what they didn't count on. I come from a generation of women who survived things that would shatter the people who think they're so strong today. I survived losing my husband. I survived financial hardship. I survived being widowed and alone and starting over. I survived all of that, and I survived it with grace. Did they really think a cut-up dress would be the thing that defeated me? I took that violation, that cruelty, and I turned it into something else. I turned it into evidence. I turned it into documentation. I turned it into truth that couldn't be hidden or denied. And in doing so, I took back my power. I took back my dignity. I took back my right to be treated with respect. That's what they took from me when they destroyed that dress. Not the ability to attend the wedding in appropriate clothing. They took my right to be included, my right to be valued, my right to be part of my own family. But I took it back. Not by force, not by manipulation, but by simply refusing to accept the role they had assigned to me. The role of the embarrassing old woman who should quietly disappear. I refused that role. And in refusing it, I changed the entire narrative. Now, when people tell this story, and apparently they do tell this story, I'm not the pathetic grandmother who wasn't wanted at her grandson's wedding. I'm the woman who stood up for herself, the woman who refused to be erased, the woman who made sure there were consequences. That's a much better story, and it's a true one. So to anyone out there who is being pushed aside by their family, who is being told they're not good enough, who is being treated as disposable, I want you to hear this. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to go quietly. You don't have to pretend it doesn't hurt. You can speak up. You can stand firm. You can make sure people understand that you matter, that your dignity matters, that you deserve respect. It won't always be easy. There will be people who tell you you're being difficult, that you're causing problems, that you should just let it go. There will be people who choose convenience over principle, who would rather you stay quiet than face uncomfortable truths. But your voice matters. Your truth matters. You matter. Don't ever let anyone make you believe otherwise. I'm 73 years old. I live in a small apartment. I shop at sales. I drink tea from my mother's old china. I watch the sunset from my window. I read books from the library. I live a simple, quiet life, and I am not embarrassed by any of it. I am not ashamed. I am not less than anyone else because I have less money, or less space, or less of what society says makes you valuable. I am exactly who I'm supposed to be, and I fought to make sure people remembered that. The lavender dress is gone. I kept a few pieces as a reminder, but I eventually threw most of it away. I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need that physical evidence because the truth was documented, acknowledged, known. I bought another dress for special occasions. It's burgundy this time, rich and deep and beautiful. I wore it to my cousin's anniversary party last month. People complimented it. I smiled and thanked them. No one at that party tried to exclude me. No one treated me as less than. No one made me feel like I needed to apologize for existing. Because word had gotten around. Word about what happens when you try to erase Margaret Holloway. You don't succeed. And you pay a price for trying. That's not being vindictive. That's being human. That's refusing to be a victim. That's choosing dignity over accommodation. And if my grandson and his wife learned something from all of this, if they became even slightly better people because they faced consequences for their actions, then maybe something good came out of all that pain after all. But even if they didn't learn anything, even if they go on treating people badly and thinking that appearances matter more than character, I still won. Because I know who I am. I know what I'm worth. And I know that I'm capable of fighting for myself when I need to. At 73 years old, that's a powerful thing to know. So yes, they cut my dress to pieces the night before the wedding. They tried to cut me out of their lives, out of that day, out of the family narrative. But I'm still here, still standing, still strong, and they're the ones who have to live with what they did. I sleep just fine at night. Can they say the same? That's the real question. That's the real consequence. Not the damaged reputations or the lost financial support or the strained relationships. Those are just external things. The real consequence is having to look at yourself in the mirror and know what you're capable of. Having to live with the knowledge that you were cruel to someone who loved you. Having to carry that weight for the rest of your life. I don't have to carry that weight. My conscience is clear. I responded to cruelty with truth, to betrayal with accountability, to exclusion with the simple refusal to disappear. That's nothing to be ashamed of. That's something to be proud of. So when people ask me if I regret sending those letters, if I regret making such a big deal out of one dress, if I regret not just quietly accepting what happened, I tell them the truth. I regret nothing. I would do it all again, because some things are worth fighting for, and self-respect is one of them. I'm Margaret Holloway. I'm 73 years old. I was excluded from my grandson's wedding. My dress was destroyed. My dignity was attacked. But I fought back, and I won. Not because I got revenge, not because I hurt them back, but because I refused to let their cruelty define me. I refused to accept the story they wanted to tell about me. I told my own story instead, the true one, and that made all the difference. The sun is setting now as I write this. The light coming through my apartment window is golden and soft. I have a cup of tea cooling on the table beside me. Everything is quiet. Everything is peaceful. This is my life. Simple, modest, dignified. And absolutely no one has the right to make me feel ashamed of it. That's what I learned from the night they destroyed my dress. That's what I learned from standing up to my grandson and his wife. That's what I learned from refusing to disappear quietly. I learned that I matter, that I always mattered, and that I have the right to make sure other people remember that. At 73, that's a good lesson to learn. Maybe the most important one of all. The dress is gone, but I'm still here. And I'm not going anywhere.